Now, the world's largest aircraft carrier is expected in the Middle East in the coming days. The USS Gerald R would be the second carrier the United States has deployed to the region as the Pentagon builds up reinforcements amid tensions with Iran. President Trump has warned that it could be very traumatic for Tehran if it doesn't make a deal over its nuclear program. The two sides are holding indirect talks over the future of Iran's nuclear capabilities. Let's analyse this with geopolitical analyst Kristina Kausch from the US think tank, the German Marshall Fund. Welcome to DW. So, fresh from menacing Venezuela, the Gerald R. is now on its way to the Middle East and closer to Iran. To do what, do you think?
Well, it could be two things. It could be to prepare strikes, military action, or it could be just the opposite, to enhance the pressure on negotiations, which are actually going well. It could indicate that the negotiations, the conversations that continue, are nearing the more sensitive issues. So we know that Trump likes to ramp up pressure to improve his negotiating position. So it could mean either or.
Right. Is it likely to work?
I don't know.
Washington...
I mean, well, we don't know because first of all, I think it's personally, I think it's quite unlikely that there's going to be major military action for many reasons. We know that President Trump has said many times that he's not interested in starting another war in the Middle East. Plus, the countries in the region have pledged him not to attack. We also know that 2 days ago, President Benjamin Netanyahu went to see Trump in Washington. He is likely to have tried to convince Trump to strike because he knows that Trump is more interested in having any deal than in having any particular outcome. And Netanyahu is worried that Trump might end up with a deal that only covers the nuclear issue, but not the Iran's support to proxies and the missile issue, and that is something that the Israelis are very worried about because they see this as an opportunity of a lifetime to do away with the regional threat from Iran for good in a moment where Iran is weak. So, and the day after Netanyahu's visit, Trump deploys his aircraft carrier. So that could be a bluff or it could be for real. OK. And just to pick out bits of what you said there, the issue firmly on the agenda is Iran's uranium enrichment. Iran wants to hold everything to that, where the US and, as you say, Israel wants to widen that. Now, you said in your answer there that, well, you think that pretty much any sort of deal that Trump comes away with, he'd be happy with. Am I being too simplistic there? What would a win for Donald Trump in this scenario look like? So it doesn't seem like Trump cares too much about the details. He wants to take a political win home. Now, the truth is that whatever he takes home as a deal cannot be too close to what the JCPOA, the former nuclear deal negotiated under the Obama administration, looked like that Trump left unilaterally a few years ago. So because that would be a failure at home. So what he needs to, the deal he needs has to be more than just say JCPOA plus. It has to be something substantively more. So at the very least, it has to be a deal on the nuclear file, which, to my understanding, is not really the controversial part here, but it also has to have at least a mention of either the proxies or the missiles, the regional issues, and that even if that mention says that these issues are going to be discussed at a later stage, but that at some point they will come onto the table. Right. And the regional powers, they agree on that. Everybody's trying to convince Trump to, to try to widen that negotiating scope in that sense.
So just to put the pressure on you, in the last 30 seconds of the show, tell me about the Gulf Arab nations who are warning Trump against attacking Iran. How much influence do they have?
They had a lot of influence already. A couple of weeks ago, strikes seemed to be imminent, and it was the Sunni Gulf states who came and asked Trump not to attack, and he didn't. Right now, the Omanis and the Qataris are the ones who are mediating the talks. And you can be sure that they exert important influence there to try to prevent any strikes that could put the Middle Eastern security and stability at risk in the long run.
Thank you so much for putting that in a nutshell for us. Kristina Kausch from the German Marshall Fund. Thanks a lot.
Thanks.
For more now, I want to go to the military and security analyst, Simon Diggins. He's a former British Army officer with service in the Middle East, Afghanistan, Iraq, Ukraine, and West Africa. It's good to have you on the program. The U.S. president appears to be moving his most powerful warship to the Middle East and closer to Iran. Do you think that this is about ramping up pressure on Iran, or do you think that a military attack of some sort is now a foregone conclusion?
Brent, good afternoon to you. I'm not sure it's a foregone conclusion. I think it's definitely about ramping up the pressure. And it's also about removing some of the vulnerabilities before. You'll recall 3 or 4 weeks ago, at the height of the protests, President Trump called on the Iranian people to rise up and overthrow the Iranian regime. Now, that didn't happen. And he said he would support them when they did so. Again, that didn't happen. The difficulty he had was that the Iranians have some 3,000 plus ballistic missiles, which they have threatened to use. Now, by bringing the Gerald R forward there to go along with the Abraham Lincoln, it gives them the ability to deploy force, but with less vulnerability. But at this stage, I think what he's trying to do is put pressure on the Iranians and say, look, this is what I can do for you, and now you can't really get at me. So if you don't do as I'm told, then I can deploy force against you without the vulnerabilities you had before. But prior to that, he'd have had to rely on his fixed bases in Qatar, in Bahrain, and in Kuwait. And the leaders of those countries were saying, actually, we don't want the consequences. We know what happened before. What happened in June, July last year, when the Americans supported the Israelis. They attacked those bases and they attacked those countries.
The Gerald R. Ford strike group, we know, was recently used in the Caribbean in the raid that captured the former Venezuelan president, Nicolas Maduro. Its deployment will put 2 U.S. aircraft carriers and warships in the Middle East. There's been talk, there's been some, I guess, guesstimating, if you will, that we're going to see some type of special force operation in maybe Tehran, similar to what we saw in Caracas in Venezuela. But these are the geography, everything is completely different when we're talking about Iran. Do you see a special operation in the works?
Well, I think that the use of special forces and the use of espionage, use of cyber, use of information operations is all part of the picture. I don't think there'd be an attempt to try and snatch the Ayatollah or anything like that. You're dealing with a different sort of regime. Maduro was on the run for months, hiding out in various places, and they were able to track him, and made it clear to them they could track him and go after him like that. I think if they went for the Iranian regime, they've got to do something about the entirety of the Iranian regime, and that's a bigger problem and a bigger issue than simply the Ayatollah himself.
What about using missiles to take out the Ayatollah, kill the top? Do you think, you don't think that would work?
Well, decapitation is always one of the options they've had. And during the raids last year, in June and July of last year, the Americans made it clear to the Iranians they knew where the Ayatollah was. So, I mean, they will have been threatening him along with everything else. It's a very difficult position for the US, and we should say for the West as well, because we do not want Iran to have ballistic missiles. And I heard your previous speaker talking about European defense. Some of the longer range missiles Iran now has can actually reach into Europe itself. And if they are, as we understand them to be, trying to produce militarized nuclear weapons for that puts them in a whole new different category. So the issue of Iran is not simply one for the West or for Israel, it's for American, it's for the whole of Europe as well. And so that is the difficulty they've got. And the challenge we've got is, this is the regime that's used to being attacked. It's hardened a lot of its shelters. There's some 3,000 plus ballistic missiles. A lot of it's in hardened locations. It's going to take quite a lot of damage to try and bring them down. And it's unclear who would then take over from there. So it's not quite as it was in Venezuela or with Maduro, where, as it appears to be at the moment, there appears to be a reasonably happy compromise running between the US and the Venezuelans. And they're now talking, Marco Rubio was talking the other day in Venezuela, of removing the sanctions. It's going to be a long time before the sanctions and the pressure is relieved on Iran.
Simon, I've got about a minute left. Let me ask you, there is fear, if you take Israel out of this equation for a moment, there's just fear here in Europe, but also in the United States, that Iran could become the next North Korea, that once they do have the bomb, then your leverage is gone. Do you think that are there contingency plans at the Pentagon, for example, if that indeed happens, if we're just too late and if we can't, snuff it out early enough?
And I think you absolutely put your finger on the problem. I mean, certainly Netanyahu last summer was warning the Iranians were only weeks away from developing a nuclear weapon. We do know that they had their uranium enriched some 60%. When you can make crude weapons from those, what they really need to do is get to 90%. And while there was a lot of damage done to the Iranian nuclear program last June and July, it was not as the Americans first claimed it to be,
right,
to wipe it off the earth. That did not happen. So I think that threat is a very real threat. And as you say, there's a very narrow window where we can actually bring the Iranian regime to heel before they actually produce nuclear weapons. And as you said, the danger there is we have a North Korea in the Middle East, and that would be very dangerous.
Simon Diggins, good to have you on the program. Good to get your analysis. We appreciate your time today. Thank you.
My pleasure.